Well, I'm not sure
Uh,
who that's for, because I'd just like to point out that
mhm.
I don't do virtue ethics, I do utilitarianism, so that's a
Oh,
weird comment to make.
he's talking to Flow State. They call him Slow State
Oh,
to make
okay.
fun of him. Yeah, it
Oh,
was
okay.
definitely shots fired back and forth to each other, so it's all good. You
No,
are
fair
in
call, fair call. Sorry, I thought I
the
was in the line of fire there.
Nope, you're well,
I'll jump
you
on the
were
bullet
you
flow
were
state.
in this
I'll throw
line
myself in
of
front of it. Yeah.
fire. Sarcastic Saint put you in the line of fire, but sincere hypocrite with the Big Ten. I find it funny how Marx says which denomination is true, but then presupposes the Western narrative of a papacy. Is it papacy?
Papacy.
Papacy, deciding councils, as well as thinking the Bible is an IKEA manual for morality.
Well, yeah. So the problem isn't that, hey, I think that the papacy is true, or I think that Eastern Orthodox is true. What I'm pointing out, that in a society, when they start to put down these denominational ethics and moral systems, all of the others disagree with them. So it's a problem that is to do with the authority that you're giving to people who are the, as I said, normative interpretation of Christianity. What's normative to each, to that different Christians, is different. So if you start to put down moral designations to your flock, and other people, they just go somewhere else. But if you're actually implementing that in society, then the rest of society are not going to obey that pronouncement. All of the, if you put something down that's Christian, all the Muslims, all the atheists, all the Hindus, all of these people, they won't follow it. So it's not good for society.
That's fair. And then Airborne Animal says with a Big Ten, disappointed in what appears to be bias moderating by Tomato, allowing Mark to interrupt and drone on, but not allowing Alex to do the same. Shots fired. Number two, real science does not require any consensus. You're both welcome to
Uh,
respond.
Yeah, I don't know where you got the first one from. Maybe if I'm asked a complex question, I'll be complicated in my answer, but I think there's nuance to things. There's not just yes and no. Things, if someone's just telling you yes or no with every question, you're not learning anything. Science it doesn't require consensus, but it does require peer review from experts. That's part of the scientific method that we have. So I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it's because Sarah met me in person, so she sized me up already. She thinks she can take me, but she doesn't know about Mark. So
I
I
could take both of you. Piss off.
I believe that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And Airborne follows up with another 5. Thank you. I will absolutely share my thoughts, particularly when they are by people that I support, super chats, and that I know can do better. Well, do better, all of us, I guess. And then we already read Brandon's out. And Andy comes in with another 5. Presentism is not moral relativism. It's exactly the opposite. Presentism assumes that our current standards are correct and uses them as a standard. And that was when I kind of pointed out that uh, the the two the two things we were going back and forth on with the what would happen then versus what would happen now if somebody harmed your family,
Yeah, I'll
so on
just
and so
quickly
forth.
address that, because basically in history, presentism is saying, hey, these people did these horrible things in the past. They may have had practices that culturally we would reject in current morality, but we don't try to judge them for doing it, because they didn't have the understanding of the consequences of those actions on their society, on their, the people around them, that we do today. So you're basically saying that, hey, something is morally acceptable in a different time, right? It's kind of like saying, hey, my grandfather said something horribly racist, but, he's a product of his time. That's exactly what it is. So any relative change from now to then, it is relativism. You would have to appeal to something else to make it non-relative, that, hey, it's based upon God's word or whatever. Okay, but just saying, hey, it was in the past, so it's okay, is presentism. I'm sorry, it just is.
and I do think that it's kind of weak for if Christians say, well, that was just back then, because kind of what they're saying is, oh, it's immoral, but God allowed it back then, so God allowed something immoral. Which is why I think in order to be consistent, you have to understand that God commanded it. It is moral. But I think, and hopefully people got the point I was trying to make. The better approach is to show the person on the opposite side that the entailment of their worldview ends in some sort of thing that they're condemning on the other side.
Fair enough. And I think Andy, get your butt up here. I know you went on this panel. Dustin with a big 5 says, doesn't Mark support a science that uses animals as test subjects and experiments? You're welcome to
Yes.
respond, Mark.
Yeah, Dustin, it's secular humanism, not secular mammalism. So I prioritize humans, and I acknowledge that that is a subjective thing because I'm human. I'm not a test, a mouse or something. So I will prioritize humans just like I will prioritize my family over, the stranger in the street. I'm sorry, that's sort of how it works. Social interactions work. So I will prioritize a human over an animal. I'm sorry if I rescue your baby before Fluffy, your cat, but that's just what I prioritize.
And so you're not like a vegan or anything, right, Mark?
No, I think that, so there's moral obligations and moral virtues, basically. So I think that it's a moral obligation not to harm anybody, not to assault anybody, all of these things. But it's a moral virtue if you give to charity. Like, it's not expected, but it does make you morally better. And I think veganism would be a moral virtue, but not a moral obligation. I've cut down on my meat a lot just because of what it does to the environment, and it seems to be better off, not doing it. But I still eat meat from time to time, sure.
And so you would say then that in the same way, like it's okay to own an animal. Like in the same way that it's okay to eat an animal.
Sure.
And I don't want to drag it back into this, but it is interesting. Do you think you could differentiate what it means to own an animal and a prisoner?
Yeah, one's an animal. I'm a humanist, not a mammalist.
Right, but like in the way that one owns an animal, isn't it similar to the way a prisoner is in a prison system?
No,
Could you tell me why?
because if I have a gecko, I can sell it or kill it.
Is that the only differentiation? Oh, well, I mean, you couldn't I mean, I don't know about gecko. It gets into vagueness because there's some animals that you would be able to kill and some that you wouldn't.
I don't know. What's her name? Kirsty Gnomes took out a dog and a goat with no repercussions. So
Really?
yeah,
I don't know.
I
Is
don't
that an
think
Australian thing?
no, that's a
Oh,
US
it's America?
political
Oh, I
thing.
don't know.
Yeah. She shot her dog and shot a goat. But
Nice.
like, you wouldn't be able to walk into a prison that you own and shoot some prisoners just for the hell of it.
Gotcha.
Airborne says with another 20, the vast majority of unaliving of the unborn, 98+% were not by grape, and thus were created via consensual sex. So because the mother chose to do it, she does not have the right to unalive the unborn per the humanist's logic.
No, she does, because it's not that you don't have a right to unalive people. It's only in certain circumstances when, say, your bodily autonomy is being violated, you're under threat. Like, so you can defend yourself. That's perfectly fine under secular humanism. There's no problem with that. So if your bodily autonomy is being violated, now what we do is we basically give time for the woman to decide if she consents to having that child or not. And if she accepts responsibility for that child, then she accepts responsibility. But she's got to make that choice whether she does accept that responsibility or whether it is infringing upon her bodily autonomy. That's basically it.
I would actually push back on that by the mere idea that you say whether she accepts responsibility or not implies there is a duty and a responsibility, right? Like, you're
What do you
already
mean?
implying that to say I accept, right, means that there's a reject, right? So I can either
Well,
reject responsibility or accept responsibility, which implies there is a responsibility, also known as a duty, already um, attached to that action, right?
Well, it's about consent. It's about whether she consents to have her body used in that way, just like you would consent whether to have somebody, put it as succinctly as possible, penetrate your body, basically, which can be, I've heard some women speak favorably of. that is a matter of consent right there. So if she does not consent to it, then she hasn't taken on responsibility for that
consenting to
child or
sex,
grandchild.
right? But this
Yeah.
says that they're saying 98% plus of them
Mhm.
were not unconsensual. That means the bulk of the women doing this, it was consensual sex that led to pregnancy, and then you said she can choose to accept responsibility or not, correct?
Correct.
From that point. Right. So
Yeah.
that's
So
what I'm saying.
what we
What I'm saying
basically
is
okay.
she has the duty, right? You're by you simply saying she can accept or reject the responsibility
Mhm.
automatically implies there is a duty already. There is a responsibility and an accountability. By rejecting responsibility, is that better for society or not? Like that's the question that rings in my head. If you say I reject responsibility, therefore I have an AB, right? You're rejecting responsibility of something that you did. You put yourself in that predicament and you are rejecting that responsibility. Therefore, if we all reject responsibility as a whole, let's apply that across the board, right? I accept responsibility or I reject it. Apply that across the board throughout all society, then wouldn't that inevitably, like if we all just said, I don't feel like it, reject, then wouldn't that make us worse off if we just applying that logic? Well, it disrupts my bodily autonomy. Don't feel like doing it. Going to work and digging holes or going to work and building houses disrupts my bodily autonomy because I don't feel like doing it, right? It hurts my body. Like I reject responsibility. Making money because, I have to survive. I reject that responsibility because I
You
don't
can
feel
do
like
that.
doing it. Right. So what I'm saying is if you apply that logic across the board and to say I reject responsibility, well, that's like a shitstorm waiting to happen.
Well, I didn't realize I was doing 2 debates tonight, but sure.
Sorry, I
No,
just
no, no, that's okay, that's okay. So what we're talking about is rejecting there's no duty up front. You're basically consenting to this or rejecting or basically rejecting your consent. You're basically withholding your consent. Now, people can choose to not go to work and live in poverty and do all of these things. It's not good for them. That their well-being will certainly suffer, sure.
Mhm.
But the question is, would it be a worse society if we forced people to go to work and forced people to dig ditches without their consent? And I would say that would be a horrible world. That would be an awful world where people were stuck doing this thing that they don't want to do.
Right.
So in that case, you have the choice of, well, I can quit my job, I can go on the
Mhm.
road, I can, neglect what I see as my responsibilities. Okay, but it's going to be a worse life for you, sure, and it may be a better life for the woman if she does have the baby, but we don't force that upon her, just like we don't force people to dig ditches.
Well, I think right. We don't have to force people to do anything, right? I agree with you in that aspect, but I think there is some form of shaming, right? Like if you're the bum on the street and there's no shame in being the bum on the street, well then, like, why try to do anything if we can all just be bums? And I think the same would go for AB as well. Like if there's no shame in just going and getting an AB, right? If there's no shame in doing that, you know what? I don't feel like doing anything. Fuck it. Like I think that we kind of lost it's the concept of taking responsibility for your actions and we're allowing people to negate responsibility. So if there was no consequence to having sex, right? Premarital sex or even being married, right? If there's no consequence, and I don't mean consequence in a negative way, but like a responsibility that comes with that. For instance, the responsibilities, you're accountable for somebody else's body in that moment. If you have an STD, so on and so forth, yada, yada, yada. Or if you get somebody pregnant, if you get pregnant, like all of these things are things to be accountable for by engaging in that act. And we've negated the responsibility completely where people don't recognize it as a response. It's just a thing, right? It's just a thing you do for fun. They don't realize that other things can happen afterwards and you are now responsible for whatever happens after this action. Anyways, I
Well,
I
no,
just heard a
I think
magic
that
word in there and I it just
Well, I
Protestants
think
bringing
that
forward.
what we're doing is we're really pushing out safe sex so people will not become pregnant, or ideally will not become pregnant. But there still is a risk factor to carrying a baby. And what right do any of us have to say you will risk injury and death for something that you don't consent to when we have medical options available? I don't think I have that right to tell somebody they have to take that risk. And their autonomy, I don't see it as saying, hey, this person has a right to violate you because that you just happen to have having sex. Consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. There's no way that is the
Yes,
case.
it
But
is. You damn
oh,
well
it
know
absolutely
it.
is not.
All right. I will.
Absolutely not.
I'm gonna hold my thoughts, and that way we can let the
Well,
panel
I'll just
ponder.
add, for the last thing I'll add, it's interesting that Christians push the contraceptive that we know is ineffective, rhythm method and all of that stuff, instead of really effective birth control methods, which is, I think it says it all right there.
Well, can I just ask one question for you, the panel? Is it your position that it's an unaliving of a human person, but it's justified?
Well, I would think that, I mean, I'd be really stretching definitions to say that, the cluster of cells that they usually, have an abortion with is a person. I'm not sure I would agree with that, but
Call it
it
20 weeks.
definitely is human cells, sure. It's a
Because well,
human fetus or a human, yeah, it is human, sure.
I was just because you said person. I'm not holding you to that. It's just in
Well,
your
yeah,
example.
yeah.
I,
Fair
I would
enough.
say that that's consistent, the consistent position. I just think like even in the way that we're talking about, like this person doesn't have the right, like it is your child you're talking about there. I don't know. I would never speak of my child that way.
Well, I don't, I think that I wouldn't try to tell you how you should feel about your child, Alex. Why should I do that?
I don't know. I just think society would be better off if we didn't hate our children.
Well, I don't think they hate their children. Like, you're sort of playing this down as just either, from Sarah, oh, they're just having fun. And I don't think anybody's, ever gone to do something like that and said, oh, this is just a bunch of fun. I think there is consequences, even though they're not as serious as they could be. There's definitely consequences. And you mentioned yourself shame, which is never useful. But Alex, you sort of say, well, it's just they hate their children. No, that's not necessarily the case. I don't think that follows.
If it is an actual person, and you can disagree with that, and that's a different debate. But if it is an actual person and it's just a justified unaliving of them, then I would say that that is hatred. But if you want to say it's just a clump of cells, then okay, cool. You don't hate this clump of cells, but
Is capital punishment hatred?
of your own children for no reason other
No,
than
no.
they're
In
in
the
your
prisons,
womb.
capital punishment in
No.
America, is that the
Yeah, they
state?
deserve
Oh,
it.
okay, well,
If you're saying your own
isn't that
child,
a
just because you
justification?
live, you deserve this. I don't know.
So if
Before we get deep, gentlemen, let's hold that thought. Hold that thought, and Mark, I will let you come out of the gate swinging if you
oh
want.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's not even my second debate tonight is against Sarah and Alex.
On abort, on
Sorry.
AB.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
You hit a spot for me. It's good. I mean, I know it's definitely a great conversation to have, and I think people know where I stand on it very well. And like when I hear little words, I'm like, oh wait, hold on. But we'll get back to this. I promise. Let's go ahead and bring the panel on, and I will get back to more super chats. I'll start reading them throughout the panel. So bear with me. Thank you. We'll hold those. I'll get to them. Here we go. For some reason, it was going slow on my end. Did it come through on everybody? Like the video play through well on everybody else?
It went through just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes
It was,
StreamYard does that. It just
yeah,
shows,
like
yeah.
starts delaying on. But I mean, I have like 10,000 tabs. So I see everybody's connecting into. So no problem there. And I do also still have backstage. I've got Brandon, Binks, Howdy. You still need to cam up for me, and Spicoli is waiting as well. So if you want them on here, you guys know what to do. You guys are all familiar with my territory and how we operate. Keep the interruptions to a minimum. Keep the spurging to a minimum. I love the entertainment factor, but not if it's the whole freaking panel. Outside of that, I will leave the floor open. Mark, if you did want to continue your thought, I will give you priority if you want to.
Fine.
I have two quick things, and then I'll shut up for a little while and just kind of observe. So the first thing I wanted to say, Alex, just so you know, because you didn't know who Kristi Noem was, she is the Secretary of Homeland Security. So just you should probably be aware of, especially if you're like a Trump supporter, which I suspect you might be. And she is
I'm
also
not very political.
That's fair enough.
I want to get more into it. I need to.
But I also wanted to push on Sarah a little bit, and again, I'm going to shut up after this. But I agree with Mark that consent to sex is not. I would say it is consent to getting pregnant, right? Like the possibility of getting pregnant, but it's not consent to carrying that pregnancy for 9 months, right? And I think the framing of it as just rejecting responsibility, like you're rejecting one responsibility, but like Mark said, like seeking an abortion itself is not like a fun, exciting experience. No one's it's not a joyous time. And it is itself a separate responsibility that people have to go through. And so I think that discernment is important. But I have secular.
What are you taking responsibility for if you have sex then?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you say that sex was taking responsibility to the possibility of getting pregnant?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so then what are you responsible for? I guess that is the responsibility for an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, you can choose. You're not consenting to staying pregnant for that full 9 months. You're consenting to that possibility, right, of getting pregnant. But we have like medical intervention. So
what does the possibility mean?
It means that you might get pregnant, and then you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to stay pregnant for 9 months.
That would carry moral weight. Wouldn't it carry moral weight?
If I speed on the highway, do I have a possibility of getting pulled over by a cop?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if he does pull me over, do I still have to pay that ticket and deal with whatever the consequences are because that possibility was just a possibility?
Yes, and those legal consequences can change based on like what the laws are of the area. The cop does not have to give you a ticket, right? They can let you off with a warning, or they can, they can say, hey, stop speeding. And if you're speeding all the time, maybe they might be more likely to give you a ticket or not. But again, it's relative to the laws. And what I'm saying is the laws aren't set in stone there. And we have medical
intervention. Drive a car, you might get into a wreck too. So do you consent to a car crash every time you get into a car?
No, you never consent to a car crash.
Right.
That's why you've got insurance.
But it's a possibility.
It's still a possibility.
Sure.
That's not true. I've tried to take people out on the road.
Oh God!
Christian morals, ladies and gentlemen. Christian morals, right there. Thanks,
that had nothing to do with Christianity. That had to do with.
They always say that, Dustin, and it always turns out otherwise.
Oh goodness!
I'm just giving Dustin a hard time. There's not a good, like, seriously. I'm just giving Dustin a hard time.
I think just one thing that Ryan said. If you take the position that it's the justified unaliving of your own child, then I can understand why you would say an AB. Sorry, I don't know if I can say these words. Is not a good experience, right? But if you don't take that position and you're just like, it's a clump of cells. Why is it like, all right, I get it. Like if I go to the dentist and get a tooth taken out, it's not a great experience, but it's not that bad.
Well, I guess I would say like the uncertainty, even if you're not sure, even if you're like are undecided on whether or not it's like you might refer to it partially as a clump of cells, you might partially like see it as your child. Like even that alone is going to be an emotional burden that you have to deal with. And I think we should be empathetic to people who are struggling with that choice.
I get that if you're back and forth on the positions and you're not sure. But if you're fully on like people, clump of cells,
the experience itself is not without
most people
risk.
Aren't like without. Most people don't want to have children ever, right? They just don't want to have them then. So they're dealing with those mixed emotions of, hey, I want this to happen, and this could be possibly a great thing, but I can't do it now. Right? They're just exercising their judgment. Doesn't mean
there's a myriad of
nihilistic
different
monsters like that, like people portray them. Like these are genuinely difficult decisions, which is why it's like so horrible to like, call out and protest people who are going to get these things done. In fact, a lot of people who are having to have these procedures don't want to have them at all. Like they're being forced to because of the
and a lot of them
situation
do.
they're in.
What would you say?
And a lot of them brag about it.
Yeah, what would you say about the person who believes it's a
I-
child?
Oh, sure, I believe you. The worst possible case probably does exist.
Yeah,
too. I've
I
met
would
some
even
horrible
I
people.
would even say there was a girl that I was mildly acquainted with who had her fifth AB, I believe, and
What's her name?
not she's nowhere in this. Like I
Yes,
haven't
remember.
seen her. It's been probably like 10 years.
She's
but
coming on
Facebook?
Monday for a
five
debate.
of them had five.
Get her email.
Looks like,
And
is she
I was
single?
just like, at what point do you stop utilizing that as your tool for prevention of having children, right? Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, we don't use that as the first tool of prevention. We want to have, sort of contraceptives as our first tool of prevention, certainly a last resort. But I really want to ask the question, what level of acceptable risk? Because don't forget, women still die in childbirth. So what level of acceptable risk is there that you want to force people to, Dustin, people to go through? Like what level of risk?
I'll lay my life down right now.
I'll be agreeable if there's a potential risk, right? Like she could die, have serious medical
There's always
issues.
a risk, Sarah.
Hold on a second.
I totally acknowledge that if that's already upfront and very obvious to even what is it, ectopics pregnancies, like you have to technically have them removed because you could die from that.
Well, you can die even without that.
I'm agreeable at the idea that if there's some actual medical harm on its face value right there, yes, I think mitigating that scenario and doing that is beneficial, right? Because it's the life of the mother at that point. However, without that standing, and I put aside all of the exceptions, the medical risks, the if there's grape, things like that. I put those to the side. I think the exceptions are not the rule. The exceptions, yeah, if it's not reasonable to expect somebody to carry for that. However,
doesn't abortion come with its own set of risks?
Yep.
Yes,
yeah,
but they're
absolutely.
much less than carrying the child to term. So
and it doesn't matter because Christians get abortions too.
That's true too.
Well,
yeah,
they're going they're going against their religion by doing
Christians
so.
have different beliefs, kind of thing. So I'm not going to lump.
Not a single Christian that is actually a Christian would hold to.
Okay, that's a no
abortion.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. I can literally give you
no
that.
Real Christian.
It's not a new. It's not a new.
Hold on. Know who's the real Christian. Judgment is God's alone.
Hey, that's great. That's great. Except for God gave us an entire book and church history to look off of to say who is a Christian and who is not. Right. The scriptures say you shall know them by their fruits.
Yeah, and Christians get.
Hold on. Does the Didache in chapter 2 verse 2 say you shouldn't have an AB?
I really want to go back to this subject without having it changed.
Oh, but you guys were all fine talking about this. You all were.
There's that part in the Old Testament where it gives you a prescription to make bitter water. So
except it isn't. Except you're interpreting it for yourself, and you think that you have the infallible authority to
bitter water is causes women to miscarry.
And you're not even a Christian, sir.
I'm not a Christian.
It never said miscarry. It never said miscarry. If you're reading the NIV, it's a mistranslation and it's a modern translation.
You know who's a Christian? You know what the right translations are? You're an arrogant piece of shit, aren't you?
Hold on. If you're saying he can't have an opinion because he's not a Christian, that is a genetic fallacy.
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said, Mark.
Now, I would like to go back to the original topic because I did want to say to Sarah that there's always a risk for women in pregnancy. It can look totally fine and there can be hemorrhaging when they actually go to birth the child. And sometimes the doctors cannot save them. So it's not a matter of, hey, these ones we don't allow through, but women still die because we don't see this coming. So I think you would have to consent to that risk in order to risk your life, even if it's a small risk. And
are they consenting to the possibility by laying down in the first place?
Hold on, Brandon. Seriously, calm down.
When Alex said, well, I would die to save them all, that's very noble, and I appreciate that, Alex, but that is your consent, right? What we would ask is, do I have a right to risk your life when it's not me? That's the question.
No, I would
and to bring it to a real world stuff a little bit more, like one of the problems with current abortion laws is that like this risk, while it's nice to say like, oh well, I support abortion in these cases, but in the real world right now, what we're struggling with is states where these like abortion bans are happening, is that the ambiguity on whether or not the mother's life is like at risk enough is turning into doctors being unsure whether or not they're allowed to treat their patients, whether or not they're allowed to give abortions to women who probably need them, because they're not sure if they can prove it in a court of law that they absolutely needed them. And so women are this is why there's an increased maternal mortality rate because of these laws.
How many women give birth every year?
The deaths are usually around 30 per 100,000 live births. So it's very low, but there is the risk.
How many people die?
Wait, you said 30 out of how many?
100,000, yeah.
That have the that die?
Die, yes.
Okay.
Last I read, it was like 30% have complications, but only 8% of that 30% have life-threatening complications.
Correct. Yeah. And a lot of it is they will have complications, and it will be ongoing. It will be some sort of injury that affects them for their life, either, in some way. But, if we're talking about deaths, it's very, very small number. I will point out, though, that is exceptionally high for a first world nation in the US.
Again, though, we're talking about abortion as if Christian versus secular morality has anything really to do with it, because Christians get abortions, and atheists like myself, or agnostics, whatever, I don't agree with abortion. So this really isn't a one-to-one.
It's about what the ethics teach, Dusty.
Well, I think the concept would be if we stuck through like Christian ethics as a society as a whole, would that therefore be better holistically, and would even things like
Christian
abortion be would abortion even be on the bill, if we were in a complete Christian society?
What are Christian ethics? Is it
right, Dusty? So I understand you just said you don't believe it's a thing, but if you don't believe it's a thing, why are you even up here debating it if it's not a thing?
No, because it's a good question we need to ask ourselves and be able to define terms. So when I'm talking,
I don't think you're a Christian.
When we compare Christian versus secular,
can the two of you, do you guys, you know what? Let's just give them a room. Everybody else, if you'd like to take a bathroom break now.
My bad.
What are Christian ethics?
Yeah. Christian ethics are the ethics taught by the normative authority of the church, as well as Scripture.
The Orthodox Church.
I'm not an Orthodox Christian, so I wouldn't be able to specifically vouch for the Orthodox Church.
There's over.
I have no blessing to teach Orthodox ethics, so I would just be going off a general Christian ethic. So I'd be going from Scripture and early church.
You are an Orthodox. Are you an Orthodox? No.
No, I'm not. I'm not considered Orthodox until I'm baptized. I'm not even catechized. Ethics. General Christian ethics would come from Scripture as well as the early church teachings.
So no clothing of different fabrics. No.
Yeah, Dusty, this is like the lowest IQ reply you could possibly give.
Yeah, because you're not giving me anything to work with. You're not going to tell me.
Okay, you understand that the ceremonial and the civil law of the Old Testament is specifically given in like Leviticus and stuff like that, right? Like what you're quoting about different fabrics.
What you
We're fulfilled. I'm telling you what ethics we hold to. We hold to the moral ethics of the Old and New Testament. We hold to the entirety of the New Testament, all the prescriptions given there. Now, the Old Testament, there are ceremonial and civil laws that no longer apply to us because the ceremonial laws were pointing to the new covenant that came and is already fulfilled. It will be fulfilled at the second coming.
So where does it say no?
You're boring me already. Shut up.
Yeah, because this motherfucker won't tell me what he thinks it is. He just keeps referring.
I just gave it to you. I just explained it word for word. Like
an easy example to point to is the Ten Commandments. You compare the Ten Commandments to the amendments of the American Constitution. So if God is so good, why the fuck didn't he give you First and Second Amendment in the commandments?
Yeah, I don't even think that the First and Second Amendment are absolute. I don't think that rights exist. So that's a great one, Teriak.
So as an American, your religion has successfully got you to disavow the First and Second Amendment, which is what.
No, I didn't disavow it. I didn't disavow it. I just said it's not my ultimate arbiter for what is good.
Europeans are like getting taken out of London.
It's not my ultimate. Yeah, it's because you allow immigration
and like Americans
with literally no restriction. That's why.
Like people getting locked up, like praying silently, praying in their heads. Outside,
understood. Yeah, I understand that, Teriak. And you know what else? And the Muslims are perfectly okay to blast their prayers on loudspeakers in Britain, right?
If they're not important to have, then why?
I didn't say they're not important to have. They're just not the ultimate arbiter.
Everyone shut up. Everyone shut up. If you don't know how to have an actual conversation and speak and then stop and listen, then I'm just going to tell you to shut the fuck up because it's already getting on my nerves. Chaos Queenie with a big 5 says, not going to lie, wine is sounding great. You earned it. Thank you so much, Chaos Queen. Please feel free to send more at this point. Sarcastic Warlock with a big 5 says, Nietzsche was not a nihilist and even wrote a book against it. If you think he's a nihilist, you are unread. Try again, both of you. What a joke. Anybody have a thought to add to that?
Back to the beginning.
I mean, I haven't read a bunch of Nietzsche. It's just everybody's opinion of him, whoever has read him. So maybe I should
call Nietzsche a nihilist when his main quote is "Life is hope."
Fair enough. Sarcastic also follows up with, I hope hell is real just so you two will go there for lying about Nietzsche. You unread garden hoses. All right, fair enough. And Airborne sends a big 10 to say women can reject responsibility for sex. Why cannot men, like the financial equivalent to unalive the unborn? How is this equitable, fair? Why are women held to a lower standard than men? It's a very good question.
Fairness is not a good question because men can't get pregnant, so there's no like already that standard doesn't apply, so it doesn't really make sense as a question. Like there's no obligation for men to grow a child in their belly.
Yeah, I agree with him.
I feel like, I mean, yeah, I know that, you know, physically it can be demanding on a woman's body, right? But it's not like the worst thing. It's not until like your, I don't know, 6th or 7th trimester when it actually starts really becoming problematic and you can't tie your own shoes or shave your legs, right? But it's, I mean,
trimester seemed to be when my ex got bitchy. Like she's getting big enough to like be uncomfortable, but
right. Yeah. Second trimesters. Well, I don't know. I felt like the second trimester, everything kind of like settled down hormonally, but I don't know. I don't think being the only female on this panel who has been pregnant and had 2 children, I feel like I can speak to the experience. I mean, I know we're not all the same, but I had 2 pregnancies and they both went perfectly fine. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Yeah, you're uncomfortable a little bit, but I mean, so is working out. Working out, you're very uncomfortable. Getting a herniated disc is uncomfortable. Like there's all sorts of things out there that are uncomfortable. It doesn't mean I have to take like a complete, like what would be the word I'm looking for? Like I don't have to go completely off the charts in order to, I don't know, satisfy.
You don't need to go after a fly with a bazooka.
Yes. Just because there's a little discomfort or like, oh, this is gonna hurt. You know, okay, it's 9 months. It's not the worst thing in the world, and
there are lots of people that are annoying that we can't kill because they're annoying.
Exactly.
I mean, you can, but
we're not supposed to kill because they're annoying.
Well, I guess I abort duck from the panel every night.
Which trimester do you think he's in?
He's like
I don't know, Sarah. I, as your attorney, would advise you not to answer that question as it might incriminate you.
And Josh with the big 5 says, since you consent to the possibility of a car crash by driving, Should you be denied medical intervention in the event of a crash?
Great question.
It's interesting because it is framed as a medical procedure, and it has this, like, you take the sting off of it, right? Now, if it's merely like removing a wart, then okay, call it a medical procedure. But if the medical procedure unalives a human person, then that's very different. It's not just merely a medical procedure. In that case, euthanasia is just another medical procedure.
Nice.
Well, we don't decide whether or not something's a medical procedure based on how ethical it is. We decide the ethics of the medical procedure.
The death penalty is a medical procedure then in that vein.
Yeah, you're just taking away, like, you're just framing it in a way that doesn't sound as bad to your benefit. Which, like, look, if you want to take the stance that it's a clump of cells, I understand where you're coming from. But if you're going to say there's any justification in unaliving your own child, I think our descendants are going to look back on that just absolutely horrified.
You know, like, most people who get abortions are already mothers.
I've heard you say that before.
And I think it
was it surprised me last time. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying that everybody I've ever, and I think I said this before anecdotally, every woman I've ever talked to about this who's had one, which isn't a ton, but they all regret it. Maybe it's possible that that's why we're having the talk about it. But
well, wouldn't that then, because I think they're also mostly married too, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, so that kind of negates, because Ryan, I believe you made an argument earlier saying that they weren't ready for another child or for a child, whether it's financially this, that, and then they're kind of forcing them into that. And that to me actually would be worse for wear in terms of the argument if they're already married and already had another child. Like, you are fully aware of what stands behind that door. And if you're married and you already have it's really not that much more to have another kid.
Well, I didn't make that argument about like whether or not sorry, real quick, just because Sarah pointed at me there. I don't think I made that argument specifically. The argument I would make is that if someone does not consent to being pregnant for 9 months, we should not force them to. It's pretty simple.
If you grow up in the projects in Chicago, and from very early on you're acquainted with this lifestyle of literally going out and jumping people and shooting people and robbing stuff, it becomes very normalized to you. And you do it without understanding the implications of your actions until you get a 25-year life sentence and you're sitting in a cell thinking about it. I think it's the same way with, you say, you're like, oh, well, mothers do it. I think we're just so numb to it as a society because it's so easy to get done. And, oh, everybody does it. I mean, look, I'd probably say 75% of the women I know have had an abortion.
I think that framing is just really condescending to the women who go through this, because they know that they're doing something that's morally complex. They're not stupid. They understand that it's a difficult decision. They're going through it. They understand it far better than you do, it seems. So,
may I have a
because I don't have a womb? How do you know I don't have a womb?
Hold on. Dustin wants to leave, and we still have some more panelists backstage waiting anyway. So, Dustin, if you want to give your final thoughts.
So the idea here is human secular ethics versus Christian ethics. The idea being that the substructure, i.e. humans, are ethical. I think that the idea of any principle being a made thing is only as ethical as the thing that makes it. So I don't believe humans being ethical is a reality, because we have examples of both sides breaching the ethical principles that are set in place by those who would judge others by breaking those principles. So when you ask these kinds of questions, it's kind of redundant. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye, Dustin. All right, and I've got Binks. Oops. And then I've got the real Brandon Mize, and Trippy Cast hanging backstage. Duck is still pending back there per usual. So if you want to see Brandon or Trippy Cast on, you know what to do. Andy, I want to turn the floor over to you, buddy.
I'm sad Mark left.
I know.
I had so many things to say about that.
Especially the present. I knew what you were saying. That's why.
He is wrong about presentism.
Follow that
100%, well. 100% wrong about that. He's just wrong about the definition. But I mean, I guess I don't know. All my points were for him, so.
Aw,
I mean,
well, I'm
But
sure.
in a way, it is a type of relativism, though, right? Because the present always becomes the past. So in a way, it is a type of relativism.
Well, the idea of presentism is that you're saying the present morals are the right ones. And he was using it.
That changes because you get to a new present, and then that present becomes the past.
But
and
then
it changes,
those
being relative.
people in the present would say our morals are correct. That's presentism, right? So that's the fixed standard that you're applying to all past events. And so the Christian can use that argument because they say that there is a fixed standard. He's saying we couldn't use presentism, but we can use presentism. So his argument was just a bad one. That's all I was pointing out. But I mean, he was just wrong about the definition.
Yeah, moral relativism isn't an adjective you can place on presentism. They're just different ideas.
Any other thoughts?
Also, why does he say that natural emotions of reciprocity and empathy are the moral bedrock? Does anybody know? I wanted to ask him that.
Because it has lots of syllables. That sounds brilliant.
That's what he said in his opener. But empathy
because the bedrock of our emotions are the moral intuitions that we are born with. Morality comes from us,
even
not outside of us.
Even evolutionary psychology is going to admit that empathy can evaporate when you have like a lack of resources or you're fighting over. I mean, you're fighting over any resources, right? Emotions are going to be.
But it's pretty obvious that we gain the evolutionary advantage by our use of compassion and empathy.
Well, that's not my point. That's not my point. My point. I don't care that they exist. My point is, he is arguing for a moral system that is contingent on evolutionary psychological points. So if our resources disappear, it's totally morally okay to kill others for those resources because our empathy would disappear.
Not necessarily what he said, but that's
the logical consequence.
No different from a religious grounding either.
Well, I think it is different than a religious grounding.
On Sunday matter, is dependent on how hungry you are.
Say that again. I didn't hear you.
How much? I know because you were fucking talking. How much
you started talking over me, dude?
On Sunday matters is relevant to how hungry you are.
Why? I don't even understand your point.
What?
Well, he's saying that like your ability to be empathetic, for instance, if I was poor on the street and had no food to eat, I wouldn't necessarily feel bad about stealing bread from you, right? My level of care.
Yeah, but that's okay. I see what you're saying. But Christians aren't saying empathy is moral bedrock. That's the difference.
I don't think that he was either.
Yes, he did in his opening. He literally said that. Go back and watch it.
And speaking of watching, if you're watching over on the Raging Tomatoes side, the mods will continue dropping the link, but the gauntlet is now open, and I'm going to shut down the Raging Tomato, and we're going to raid over to the gauntlet. Same show, different channel. If you want to keep watching, just buckle up, sit down, shut up, and enjoy the raid over. Okay.
Popcorn.
And then Sarcastic Warlock says, Alex, it's established that you talk when you have no idea of what you're talking about, but just repeat what you've heard. How many times have you borne false witness tonight besides that?
Does anybody else on the panel did not know that Nietzsche wasn't a nihilist? And I'm not even going to admit to that.
I did know this, yes.
Yeah. All right. But I just looked it up. And look, because I said, this is just what I've heard. But just because I was wrong on one thing doesn't mean I'm just bad faith on everything. That's funny. But I'm looking it up, and I'm getting the quote now. I don't know. Some dude just said he was a self-professed nihilist. So I don't have the quote yet. That's why
he calls himself an active nihilist. There's a difference between active and passive nihilism. So in The Will to Power, he calls himself the perfect nihilist of Europe because his whole point of his philosophy is to move away from the moral grounding of the Christian ethic. And that leaves you in nihilism, but he doesn't want to stay there, right? So that's his will to power, where he says, okay, now we have to create our own morality. We have to become gods ourselves. So that's his point.
Okay. Right. If nothing has intrinsic meaning, that doesn't mean you can't bring meaning into the world.
Yeah, meaning is subjective.
It's not ultimate meaning.
Yeah, I haven't read Nietzsche. It's just every time I've heard him bring up, it's in the context of nihilism. So I was wrong about that.
I mean, he's a nihilist
probably in a Christian
particular
context.
way.
Yeah.
No, he is a nihilist in a particular way, yes. But he doesn't want to.
He's not a formal nihilist. He's not like he doesn't believe that
he's a self-admitted positive nihilist.
This is why philosophy is good, but too much philosophy is not good.
His whole philosophy is the will to power, which is trying to present an alternative like ethic to Christianity. So he still believed in ethics and morality. He just didn't like have like a traditional view on it. And he developed over time, like he had different views as he got older. Can I ask? I wanted to ask Alex a question. Actually, I assume that you think chattel slavery is immoral, right?
How would you? Because I think that, like, if you were to kidnap people for no reason and enslave them, that would be wrong. But if people
What
were
would be a good
slaves,
reason?
Criminals, for example,
And enslave them?
yeah, absolutely, we do it every day.
Well, I'm talking like chattel slavery, like they have no rights. I mean, even
Right, that's a different.
have a certain degree of rights. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are two different questions.
Yeah.
So when you say no rights, not even like, would you say the American slavery was chattel slavery?
Yeah.
So they didn't have no rights. They just, the rights weren't enforced very often.
They were property. I mean, they had rights in terms of being property, but they didn't have like rights in terms of being a human.
Well, like they had the right to live.
Children. That's what chattel slavery is. You even own their children.
Is the right to life a human right?
It wasn't under that system.
They have the right to live. You couldn't just off. You couldn't just off a slave.
I believe you could.
Nope.
And people did.
No,
only insofar as you're damaging someone else's property, right?
No, your own slave. You could not just off them, and it just wasn't enforced, especially culturally. Like, right, like especially like we're so quick because we have cameras and everything. Like, crime is caught a lot more often, but before, crime had to be reported. And so if you have a lot of people who are on your side and think it's okay to just off your slave, even though the law says you can't, then, you know, they're not going to report you. So a lot of these things went unreported and weren't enforced, but it doesn't mean the laws weren't on the books.
So to be clear, then you agree that practically it was allowed. It was like people, maybe there was laws against it, but in for all intents and purposes, people were capable of doing this without facing any punishment, right?
What would happen to a slave if he ran away? Like, he would get shot.
Well, yeah, so there's capital punishment for running away. Sure, that's different than just offing your slave for no reason.
So, are you cool with it?
Yeah, I'm not cool.
No, he's making descriptive statements.
Okay. But
where the difference between a descriptive and prescriptive
what you
statement?
define as chattel slavery. That's
chattel, like the one I just described. Yeah, just no rights.
But then you said no rights. But then you say American slavery is chattel slavery, but they had some rights, which is why I was trying to get down on the definition.
No human rights.
Okay, so then American slavery wasn't chattel slavery.
Yes, this is semantic masturbation. Yeah. Let's move on.
Dusty, you don't even understand the difference between
a Kenneth Copeland have to say about this.
Brandon, I know you got a boner for me, but your neck beard is ridiculous.
Dusty, that's great. You can talk all the shit about my beard that you want, right? But make the difference between a descriptive and prescriptive statement before you fucking open your mouth, Dusty. How about that?
What's the difference between your bitchin' ass neck beard and not a neck beard?
Would you like a debate, Dusty?
No.
Oh, of course. Okay, runner. Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna give you the dignity of treating you like you're a real person or a real contender. You're not. You're just a Christian bro, ball washer.
Brandon, was this you earlier?
Yes, that was me. I had to go on a different account for some reason. I can't send anything.
You're still behind, right? You know that you're still behind. You still didn't even top the atheist agnostic category.
Oh yeah, I wasn't replying to everyone, just you, Dusty.
All right, you got 5 in the back, Dusty.
Well, I guess I want to let whatever the person was talking thinks. Yeah, asking. But you were asking.
About my whole point of that question. So like, if you like, it just just the idea of like no, even if there was like no rights, like just the idea of a slave having 0 rights, piece of property.
I'm against that.
Okay, where do you get that basis from? Because the Bible and historically had no problem with that whatsoever. So to me, to even have that opinion for you, you'd have to have a modern kind of take on that, which would be a development outside of Christianity, right?
That's factually wrong. If you want to supply the scripture where you think that it's allowing for
there's slavery in both the Old and the New Testament
with no rights,
it was never.
All right, show me.
I show you that there was slavery
with no rights.
So are you denying that the Bible, specifically those parts of the Old Testament, were used for years upon years upon years to justify this being done to people as it was being done?
That's not even a part of what Thinks is asking me, dude.
No, but I think it's true though. But I think to Alex's credit here, I think it's also true that a lot of abolitionists did use scripture as well.
Absolutely.
Sure, but that was that's where I was going too. Yeah, And I just didn't think we were getting there.
Years of the church never had anything to say about slavery, and I think that's like something that Christians have to take seriously.
If your moral prognostications are so vague that they can both be used to justify and be against slavery, how can you possibly say that you have moral clarity coming from the Bible?
If two people have different opinions on a text, does that mean the text there's not a true interpretation of it?
Yeah, Plato wrote contradiction into his plays all the time.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that.
So, like, what I'm saying is the FG, his argument goes against him as well, because, like, one of the great philosophers of all time has contradictions in his work. So, just being able to point saying that a contradiction exists in the Bible, why the fuck would you even read it, is not an exact, it's not a valid argument. Fallacious.
I mean, I wouldn't say that it was a contradiction. But what I'm saying, like, because we have these loaded terms of slavery, and everybody thinks they know what they mean by them, but it's usually just usually we just think of like American slavery. So when you just throw out these terms like, well, a slave has no rights and you can just do whatever you want to them. No, you just don't understand basic logic.
No, I've heard this 1,000 times.
Can you shut up while I talk? Thanks. When you just throw out these terms and then say, well, yeah, slavery means you own them. They have no rights and you can do whatever you want to them. That's not what the Bible talks about at all. And you can try to look it up, Binks, if you want. I don't know if you still are, but it's just not in there.
There's definitely slavery in the Bible. I don't know what they'll tell you.
Dude. Again, you're not understanding what I'm saying.
Chattel slavery in the Bible. Absolutely.
You said slavery without rights, right?
Chattel slavery. That's what I'm talking about.
That's not chattel slavery. We already went over this.
Slavery without rights is chattel slavery. There's.
I don't understand why this isn't connecting.
There's very simple because there's a very traditional idea of what slavery is. There's chattel slavery, and then there's indentured servitude.
Yeah, Binks. Do you see Django Unchained? Do you see Django Unchained, Binks?
Yes, it is completely historically accurate.
Yeah, so is Quentin Tarantino racist?
I don't know.
Possibly.
Because Quentin Tarantino had like in that film there's slavery.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So it's like just because. Yeah. So just because one could make the argument that just because Quentin Tarantino had slavery in his film, like, oh, he could be racist, but the fact that it's like, no, I'm just being, you said it there, like being historically
accurate. What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
Yeah, because like just because it's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean that like that's one of the principles of like or the truth of the story. You know what I mean?
Because the Bible like
prognostications that people followed.
Nobody's basing their entire life and the metaphysical worldview off of Django Unchained. As far as I know, maybe they're right.
Speak for yourself.
I appreciate the attempt. It was a good attempt, but I do think that the prescriptions for slavery in the Bible came from God. So to just hand wave them away would be kind of a weak argument, and I think the atheists on the panel can appreciate that. Yeah, you just can't even show your face.
No, they mostly came from Babylon because that's where they were enslaved.
You know what? Watch this.
Joel comes in with a big 5 and says, I don't think the abortion issue is about Christian or atheist. I think normal humans see it as repugnant in essence. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, but I think, essentially Christianity pushes, go forward and be fruitful and multiply and all that stuff. Like, even birth control is wrong in Catholicism, right? Any form of birth control. So I don't know. I think there are pieces in there that would. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I could flip this on its head really easily, and the polling would probably support me that I think the normal human position is that forced birth is a repugnant position in essence. So
I feel like it's the way you're viewing it, right? Like forced birth, like it's
forcing someone to give birth instead of having a procedure that could stop them from having to go through that.
Yeah, definitionally, if you do something that is against someone's consent, they are by definition forced, right? If I put you into a car without your consent, you're being forced, right? You're being kidnapped. Consent is what morality hinges upon.
Okay. If I put you in
force them to take care of their children once they're born, right? So at some point we do force them to do things.
Yeah.
You can put it up for adoption at that point.
Wait, yeah,
if you put your 5-year-old up for adoption, you're a piece of shit, and I think everybody agrees to that.
Maybe you're still allowed to.
I would say if you have every means of taking care of them and you just want to be negligent, I would agree.
Yeah, I'm just not buying that. Like, you're not consenting to pregnancy. Like, you consent to have sex, and you know what the potential thing that could happen is.
Can you stop
right?
consent mid-sex, Sarah?
Can you stop consent of sex? Yeah, if I'm in the middle of it and I'm like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it, and I can get up and walk away. Absolutely.
So consent is a continuous thing. It's not just something you just give once.
Right, but the action, like the thing that happens after the fact, right? You've consented to sex, right? It's the consequence of your action, and I don't view the consequence as a negative word in this instance, right? But if I can consent to touching the stove when it's hot, and I can put my hand on that stove, and oh my God, no, hold up, but oh my God, the stove was hot, so I'm gonna remove my consent and take my hand off the stove. That doesn't mean my hand's gonna still be burning and leave a mark later, and then I can't change anything after that point. It's already done.
It's a consequence.
I can
want to choose whether or not you want to treat the
burn,
burn,
but I cannot take it back.
Yeah, but so this is why the discernment I made, when I first came on, is that you're consenting to the possibility of getting pregnant. That's true. I agree with that. But you're not consenting to staying pregnant for 9 months, and that's the distinction we're making.
I think this is where people just negate the idea of responsibility. Like, if I do something that I know could have a specific outcome, and even though I'm like, you know what, the chances of that outcome happening are like 50-50. I'll take my chance and see what happens, right? And then, oops, it didn't work out in your favor and you got pregnant. Like, okay, well, you took that risk. That's what risk is.
I think they would say, now, I kind of want to do a sanity check. I'm not pro-life by any means of the imagination. But I do want to do a sanity check, because I think that what they would say to you, Sarah, is when you say that they're shucking responsibility, is that's just kind of begging the question against their view. They're going to reject that there's a responsibility there to take care of the children. So I think they're just going to reject that outright. But I do want to do a sanity check for the bodily autonomy people on the panel. Is there any point in the pregnancy where you think it would be wrong to unalive the fetus?
I'm of the opinion.
I have an interesting take.
I think it's an interesting question, but this is why I always bring it to the actual laws that are going on right now, because I might think at a certain point that it's not good for someone to seek an abortion, but I don't want to block people from accessing it just because I don't have knowledge of the full spectrum of possibilities that someone could be going through at that 20-week mark. And I really I think that decision belongs between them and their doctor, and they can discern. They're the people most equipped to discern whether when it's the appropriate time to do that. And otherwise, I think we're putting people's lives at risk, and I don't think that's necessary.
So, I mean, let's just say we live in like a perfect world, right? And somebody just wants to have an abortion out of convenience. And they don't just want like a non-lethal abortion at 30 weeks. They want like a lethal abortion at 30 weeks. Should they be allowed to do that?
I would rather that be allowed than block someone who needs an abortion.
Yeah, see, that's wild to me. What, like 39 weeks?
Well, no,
I think this is such a minuscule thing. I don't think this is. I think there's not enough of this happening, but I think there's more people who would die from a lack of access to abortions because of laws that would try to prevent those people than there would be people actually using those laws just for a casual
What about in the 30th trimester?
I understand the practical concerns. I'm not disagreeing with the practical concerns. I just want to make sure, because when I talk to like bodily autonomy pro-choicers, they bite the craziest bullets, and that just sounds insane to me. 39 weeks, it'd be like fine just out of convenience. If they don't want a non-lethal, they want a lethal abortion. That sounds insane. That's going to
You understand that the argument I'm making is that like restricting that would be more likely to put people who aren't doing that, right? To put those people at risk.
Aren't there allowable situations though, right? Like even if it's you're go into labor early or something, or not even that, like something's happening to the baby and they need to get it out of you, like there we still have the NICU and all of these different scenarios. So I don't even know if like I don't even know if you could abort at that stage, right? Like because they're coming out and they are capable of survival.
That kid would be reading the newspaper and asking where his address is.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is really just to test like what their sort of, not necessarily where the legal line should be, but where their moral line should be. I think me and Ryan are kind of getting entangled the legality and the morality thing here. I'm talking about the morality, not necessarily the legality.
Oh, you're muted, Ryan.
Sorry, yeah, I might say
before you
that.
respond, I want to just give a big shout out because this is big. Mike 23 came in with not just 50 Powder Dusty memberships, but a full 70 altogether. Shout out to you.
Shout out to Mike.
And then Alex, if you say a thing that you've only heard as thought, if you only heard as though it is a fact, you're bearing false witness. You lie. How many other times tonight? And if you want to respond, you're welcome to, but otherwise we can hand it back to Ryan.
Yeah, I think if you make a mistake in a debate once, you're a filthy piece of shit.
True. I agree.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But
ahead, Ryan.
yeah, I guess for like I might think it's like morally wrong for someone to get an abortion just out of convenience or whatever at 30 weeks. There's no they know 100%. They're like, there's no risk. I just hate babies and I want to end this baby's life. Like I think it's a horrible thing, and I find that person like morally repugnant. But like I think the laws that we would need to force that person not to have access to that abortion would put people who do need it at risk, and that's I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, that may be true. I'm not too well read on the empirical question there, so you may be right. I just wanted to do a quick sanity check to make sure you're not completely fucking insane, Ryan. Okay.
Well,
he's still insane.
I was gonna say that's still
That's
subjective.
I have a hypothetical for the pro-choicers. Because I think the argument goes, if you have a child who is out of the womb, let's say a month old, because you can save their life and they're not physically attached to the mother, then it would be wrong to off them because there are other options. Am I right in saying that?
Can you say that again?
What was the question?
Like, so the most pro-choicers, I'd say like a very high majority, 99%, would not be okay with infanticide, right? Because they say there's other options, adoption, etc. Once the child is born, you can't kill them, right?